If you're interested in neural networks or the foundational concepts behind large models, I invite you to continue reading. What follows may offer you a perspective you've never considered, one that might surprise you by the end. Let's start by consulting a naturalist. The core of Darwin's theory of evolution is summarized by the phrase, natural selection through competitions, survival of the fittest. But what exactly does natural selection mean? Competition refers to the struggle among organisms for survival. Selection refers to the filtering mechanism by which nature chooses which organisms survive. Natural selection is the process whereby organisms better adapted to their environment tend to survive and produce more offspring, while those less adapted are eliminated. This concept, originally proposed by Charles Darwin, is grounded in three core mechanisms: variation, inheritance, and selection due to environmental interaction. Now here's a paradox. If natural selection favors the strong, why do the weak still survive in modern societies, nations, tribes, and corporations? Shouldn't the weak be eliminated? A possible answer might be, maybe the weak are still adapted, just in a different way. But this intuition remains vague. Here's a key insight, inspired by the paper algorithms for constructing society, organizations, and also for lives. A nation, a tribe, a corporation, these are essentially nested neural networks composed of individuals. When the network as a whole is strong, even weak individuals within it can survive. This is because it is the overall organization that adapts successfully to the environment, not necessarily every constituent unit on its own. In other words, both individual and collective adaptive capacities matter, and are evaluated relative to those of other networks. This brings us back to the idea of selection. Suppose I ask you to model selection with a mathematical function. What would that look like? You might say, selection doesn't transform the input directly. It just acts as a gate. If the input passes a certain threshold, it's selected. Otherwise, it's filtered out. That concept leads naturally to the following simple function. fx plus b equals max b, b plus x. Wait a minute, doesn't that look like a shifted version of the ReLu rectified linear unit activation function used in neural networks? Indeed it does. In 2001, neuroscientists Dayan and Abbott proposed more biologically accurate models for neuron activation, reflecting how actual neurons respond to stimuli in the brain. These biological models closely resemble ReLu and its variants. So what does this tell us? That perhaps it's not coincidental that natural selection, neuron activation, and machine learning activation functions all share structural similarities. After all, in biology, organisms typically respond to stimuli nonlinearly. At low intensities, they may respond strongly. But once a threshold is passed, their response saturates. Think of hunger. The first bite of food when you're starving is incredibly satisfying. The second still feels good. But by the third bowl of food, your satisfaction starts to taper off. By the fifth, you're overwhelmed, it becomes unpleasant. This nonlinear saturation is biologically universal. At this point, you might complain. Really? All this build-up and you end with what looks like a middle school level formula. Isn't there anything more complex? Is this really the basis of intelligence? Yes, it is surprisingly simple, but the power lies not in the individual parts, but in their combination. It's not unlike a chain reaction, or even a nuclear explosion. Teen elements, when combined correctly, can yield enormous power. As OpenAI's chief scientist Ilya Sutskever once remarked, the most astonishing thing in his research career has been this: it works. Despite its simplicity, the neural network actually learns. In conclusion, you might find it worthwhile to compare neural network adaptability with Lamarckian evolution. You'll find striking similarities. And when considering concepts such as punctuated equilibrium, continuous variation, and neutral mutation, the framework remains consistent. In fact, I've written a related article titled Neutral Right and Wrong, which dives deeper into these topics. That is why I believe neural networks represent a unifying framework for understanding evolution. If you find flaws or points worth falsifying, feel free to note them down and join the discussion. And if you're curious to see where this goes next, stay tuned for the next chapter.